Hi, my name is Michael Bean. I'm an acting teacher. This is your free lesson from myfreeactingclass.com for Tuesday, March the 9th. I own and run Biz Studio and Beatty Street Studios in Vancouver, BC. I've been teaching acting for almost 20 years. You can find more information about this project and archive of past videos and more information about me and anything that you want. At myfreeactingclass.com, including the link for where you would submit videos for our Tuesday self-tape review. So we're going to be reviewing 2 different self-tapes and looking at a 3rd self-tape today. And then if we've got time, I'm going to show you some fun things. So let's jump right into the self-tapes. I like using those to talk about camera technique. So camera technique, basically what we're looking for is a neutral background. Right now I'm just using a blank wall. Eye light, so light reflected in the eyes. Right now I have a large ring light that's opposite me, and you can see that if I turn it off, whoop, oh, suddenly I look very dark and kind of dead. Don't I look very serious and not nearly as interesting? One of the things that I find fascinating about good lighting, is how even after many, many years of doing this, it still tricks my eye. And I'll have students who will get a ring light without telling me. And then one class will just be like, wow, Candy, why do you just look so great today? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's the lighting. Lighting is an enormous part of film and TV and of photography. Anybody who's dabbled in it at all can tell you that. And it's really like how sort of we trick our eyes, especially the light reflected in the eyes gives the audience a sense that they can feel what you're feeling. Now I'm in a medium close-up, head just down to just below the armpits, a little bit of space on either side, and I'm not seeing a bunch of space up above. And I think this is the thing that I see in tapes most often, is somebody puts their head right in the center of the frame instead of putting their eyeballs right here in the top third. This is what we're used to seeing for film and TV framing and for photographs as well. And so just please don't do this. It's really easy. It's really easy to fix. Let's take a look at Christina's self-tape because she's the first one up here. So Christina has been diligently doing the character lines exercise, which you will find on the myfreeactingclass.com. You can see right away, we've got a neutral background. Let's see if we can get, skip ahead just to where we can see her eyes. We've got an eye light reflected in her eyes, her eye line, so the line between her eyes and what she's looking at. When I'm doing this tape, I'm generally looking right at you because I'm talking to you. But for film and TV, you want to be looking just off to one side or just off to the other. And again, this is one of those extraordinarily simple things that I have actors who've been in my class. I was teaching last night, and I have actors who've been in my class for a year, at least a year, who forget, who don't remember this kind of very simple but highly useful technical thing, which maybe I'll just pop back to me for a second. If you've got 2 different things or 2 different people, or basically any 2 different relationships, you place them on just one side of the camera and just the other side of the camera. And I can even put them closer. I can put them just there and just there. Now, for me, actual Michael Bean, that's this far apart. But I want to show you the difference. So if I go, wow, okay, I've got one strong opinion, I've got a totally different strong opinion. And if I put them on opposite sides, because my eyeballs go from that side of the screen to that side of the screen when you're watching, crystal clear. Now, if I take that same distance and I put it over here on this side, and I try and go one strong opinion, another strong opinion, it looks like kind of, maybe I'm just not sure where I'm looking, right? So it's the same distance, but you put it on opposite sides of the camera. I would say it's important to me when I'm teaching because it's so useful. Like, it is such a simple fix to make and is so effective in storytelling. So just throwing that out there as a reminder. Now let's go back to Christina's tape. Right, so eye light, the eye line is right there beside the camera. Very clear. Big space over the head. Looks like Christina has the same wall color as I do. The like off-white, gray, blue, green. I don't know. I have somebody who shoots against a black wall that doesn't seem to work so well. But especially in the age of COVID and self-tapes, they really don't seem to be bothered by what color the background is. Let's watch the actual tape.
I got an A. I got an A. Yes. You know what this means? Let's go. A clump.
Really fun, Christina. So my invitation to Christina from last week's lesson was to continue to explore, and something that she said, and I think Claudine, you and Candy were both here last week. She was like, I just like get angry and happy. They're hard for me. I can't really do them. Yeah, and so Christine, I'm so glad that you just went for it. And that exercise of opening the letter and finding information is actually one that I will often use for uh, practicing emotional access, right? Basically, you open the letter, and inside is the best news you can get, or the worst news that you can get. Um, it's an exercise that I've used in class periodically, that I think can be highly useful. And so I love that you just found it on your own. What a great addition! Like simple prop, right? You've got this line, you add a piece of paper, piece of cake, right? Like the using a script, as a prop is something that can be highly, highly effective. And just your commitment on it is wonderful. Now you've heard those little ad libs at the beginning and at the end, which is something else that I've talked about with these character lines and also with scenes, that if actors are silent, like actually silent, if they're not making sound, if they don't feel that little permission to okay, or that sort of one word that she has at the beginning, then the story starts to feel like mime. It starts to feel restrained. If you were taping this, for an audition, Christina, and your one line was I got an A, I got an A, and there were no lines after that, I would just caution you to like do all of the what this means, do that as exploration, but then the tape just makes sound, or sort of take it back, take it onto a word, right? So that after I got an A, I got an A, you would do something like yes, right? Right, so keeping all of the good from your exploration, keeping all of what's useful there, but you're just not writing more script than they've given you. But I think that with Adlibs, one or two words, nobody's even going to notice typically. With the exception of if you take really tight writing, like especially Jackie Lind, for in my experience, Vancouver-based casting director really doesn't like you ad-libs. Particularly is not a fan of buttons. When I was auditioning in person, a number of times I auditioned for Jackie, and then she was like, "Okay, let's just do it again, but without the button." And I was like, "Okay, I get it. I won't button it." To button the comedy scene is to do the script and then sort of add a funny line of your own at the end of the script, sort of after the writing finishes, to sort of show them that like, hey, I understand comedy and I understand this kind of comedy and I'm going to find something fun with it. And that one's just more of a risk because some writers, directors love it. They're like, yeah, great, Christina really knows comedy. And some of them are like, no, we want somebody to be funny with the script we give you. So, potato, potato. Let's look at this again because it's so short. We can watch it again. Right, it's wonderfully animated, Christina, and it doesn't seem like you are. It doesn't seem like you're pushing the feeling here.
I got an A. I got an A.
Yeah, right. And so the yes, probably is like where we would cut it off if that was the script. And then we just have you say yes and do the happy dance. If we were sort of taping it for real audition, it's shocking how much information you can put into a script that's only one or two lines. I ended up doing this with some of my students in class yesterday. They're like, actually, we've got this 2-line audition. Can we work that instead? And relationships, physicality. What does the story mean to you? How are we telling that story? that level of detail, I think you get in this single line exercise. And I would say that the tape that you just sent us, Christina, represents really significant progress, from say the first work that you did just in class, what, like this class, I mean, maybe 8 months ago, 9 months ago, when you would like come to class and sort of do demos. And certainly from the first of those tapes that you did a couple of months ago. If I'd been thinking, I would have queued that up so I could have played them back to back and said, like, this is Christina a couple of months ago. This is Christina now. Look at that progress. So maybe I'll do that for next time, just as an illustration, because benchmarking is part of why you take class, and what I hope that these Tuesdays can be useful for. Now let's look at Victoria's tape. Right, so right away, the framing is it's that medium close-up, just about the armpits to the top of the head. Eye light, she's looking directly at the camera because she's going to do her slate.
Hi, my name is Victoria Ridley. I'm 5 years old and I'm with Alan and Abel.
The only thing that I would say here in the slate is look out for this. And for somebody who's 5, it's probably a complete non-issue. But I think we talked about in a previous lesson about sort of like getting their fidgets out, and you're like, yeah, I get to do that all the time. It can be a red flag for decision makers with actors who are that young to be like, oh, is she's not going to be able to stop doing that? But I mean, at the top of a slate like this, if given that she's not doing it in the tape, I just don't think it's an issue.
Where were we then?
And so I think she's the character's written as sort of like creepy, like alien invader child. So the simplicity, the seriousness, zooming in slightly closer than medium close up, the big eyeballs, like those are doing a lot of the work here. So I think that this is a great example of, so we're getting the character immediately before she starts going into the scene.
Can't you sleep, little bear? Asked Big Bear. Why don't you trust us, Granny? Do you mean I do trust you? No, you don't. That's why you ask Nathan those questions.
Right? I love what she's doing with her eyes here. It would be interesting. Again, with 5, it's so tricky because sometimes you give them more direction and it pulls them out of it. It would be interesting, I think if I was exploring it, to say like, okay, Victoria, like, what happens if you do it without blinking? Yeah, and maybe that would just get in her head and she wouldn't be able to do it. But it would be interesting because direct eye contact and not blinking can both read as power play, can both read as powerful, which in the context of somebody as young as her, would likely read as creepy, which is sort of one of the things that's so great about that opening frame.
You're trying to hurt us. Evie, I'd never want to hurt you. We don't want to hurt you either. Everything okay? It's fine, we're just reading.
And see, that's Claudine. Do you see the shadow? That's her cross into the other side of the frame to make it easy for Victoria's eye lines. Anybody who's watching these tapes who's got a very young person, totally legit. And you can see that it really helped Victoria. Then she didn't have to remember. Sometimes as a coach, I'll basically try both. I'll try either just like walking to the other side of the camera going and like kind of waving to get their attention, or sometimes I'll be like, if it's really back and forth, then I literally do this. I'll be like, I'm saying one of the lines, I'm saying the other one of the lines, and sometimes that works to like, if there's really like a back and forth and you're trying to get them to do 2 different eye lines. Also, I will say that like with 5-year-olds, especially like 5, 6, 7, sometimes you're just like, well, I'm gonna give up on the idea of multiple eye lines, and they're just going to look the same place to say all the lines, because them sounding like a real person is just more important.
Together. I'm tired, Mummy. That's okay, sweetheart. We can say the night now.
And the the sort of abrupt, going to sleep. Again, I would, if I was coaching Victoria, I would just say, settle back in like you're getting ready for sleep. Just try and sort of slow it down so that it was a little bit more honest. I think that's something that I've definitely seen in tapes before, especially with young people. Okay, sleep. Oh man, and she's not doing it here. So one thing that Victoria's doing really well here is she's just leaning her head on the back of the chair. So often, particularly in class, I've seen actors in a chair when it's time for bed just go like this. What are you doing? Just scooch forward in the chair so that you can lean on the back wall, because anything else just looks so odd. So something else that's working here.
Evie, where are you, Evie? Evie, don't move. Don't move! Let me go! Let me go! Let me go! Savannah, let her go! Mum, what are you doing? She was in the water. She wanted to hurt me.
Great work. Looks like you've got her doing the like kind of struggling against herself thing, which I don't know if that was informed by you coming to these, but like it works, right? She's giving herself some resistance. She's got that build, and that's affecting her voice. So then she's not having to work as much for the intensity. There's some sort of moments in between where basically like the tape that we just saw was great. There are a couple of things that I could think of to try, and then it would just be like, does that exploration inform it in a good way, or does it just get the kid in her head, and get her into like getting it right mode? The one of the things you could try, is just like filling in the in-between moments, with imagination a little bit, to sort of like invent the story, and I think this is true for actors at any age, but it's particularly obvious with 5-year-olds. So it's easy for me to say to you, oh yeah, Candy, when you're doing it, like, just because the relationship in the script is, father-daughter, you don't have to be imagining father-daughter, but let's say Candy's like prepared the script for a while, and she's like, basically it's stuck in her head. She's like, I don't know, I just can't help picturing my dad there, even though that emotional relationship doesn't work for the scene, and it's pulling me out. Whereas somebody as young as Victoria, you can be like, okay, so like it's supposed to be grandma who's trying to drown you, but like but let's make it something that's weirder, like and you can be like, you can go into something genuinely scary, if you want to, or you can also just go into like, well, what would be weird, like what would be the thing that would make no sense? Okay, and so yeah, like a green cat, you're right, that does make no sense. And so nobody has to know that like she's stopping and seeing the green cat in between one line and another line, but you can sort of paint this vivid imaginary world for them that gives them strong reactions, that is unconnected to the emotional arc of the scene necessarily, but gets the result that you want. And I think that as adults, we can do that to ourselves as well. We're just more reluctant to do it. We're like, I don't know, that's weird. They'll know what I'm thinking. And I really think that's an extension of that thing that like we sort of all run into at adolescence and then carry into our lives, that sense that other people can tell what we're thinking, when of course, very clearly, obviously, they totally can't. But as actors, we can bring in that creative thinking, probably a little bit more often than we do. Claudine, do you have any questions about any of that?
No, that was good. She in the middle, where after she was screaming, before she said her last thing, she had a torch in her eye. So that's why she kind of went like that, because there was a torch. So I didn't know if I portrayed that enough, that there was a torch in her eye, because I was trying to help her envision that there was a torch in her eye, so she couldn't quite see. So I don't know whether it came across like that or not.
No, I mean, I didn't pick that up, but the folks watching are going to have the script in front of them.
Yeah. It's not that bad. It was like,
yeah, I thought watching it, it just looked like part of her reaction to the feeling. So that's actually a perfect example, because it looked like she was just disturbed by the thing that had happened, and it doesn't matter to me at all, to whether or not there's a light, in her eyes, or whether it's just like she's having an emotional experience. So that's fantastic. Let me show that to you again. So this, I think, is a concrete example of exactly what I'm talking about. Now let's say that that Claudine was working with her daughter and saying, and in her head she's like, well, there's this particular feeling I want, but I know if I just tell my daughter the feeling, she'll just sort of make the face. She'll just go, or something, and it doesn't work. And sort of everybody's got to sort of work with themselves or with their kid in their own way. So it's like, okay, well, instead of making the face, instead of saying the feeling, I'm going to say there's a bright light shining in your eyes. And what does she do? She like kind of recoils. She rubs her face a little bit. All things that people absolutely do when they're upset, without her having to like play upset. Now that's not what was done deliberately here, but I think it's a concrete example of the kind of tool that I'm suggesting. Okay, really nice work, you two.
She was also supposed to cry at the end. She was supposed to be whimpering, crying, but she couldn't do that. So I just told her just to be upset and do it as natural as possible, because she couldn't cry.
What I will typically say to students, if especially if crying is necessary, like the worst scenes are the ones where I'm doing a scene with Christina and Christina's line is, Michael Biehn, why are you crying? Because most of the rest of the time you can read it and go like, well, if I leak or don't leak on that line, it doesn't really matter. Unless Christina's line is, Michael Biehn, why are you crying? In which case I'm like, God, okay. And so either, I've got to set it up, so that I'm actually leaking, or what I will typically tell students is, as long as you're carrying the upset in your body, then that'll be enough to tell the story. If the other character specifically references crying, just hide from us in some way that's honest for you. Right? So never, please, never, please, anybody watching this, and you, the three of you, never do this. I'm gonna wipe pretend tears that aren't there from the corners of my eyes. Super fake. You will not get away with it. It does not work. There's a light shining right in your eyes. If there was water there, it would reflect the light. They would see it. It's super, super hard to get away with. But what you can do is, if I'm having this moment, then I can use body posture to tell that story. Right? I can roll my shoulders and I can drop my head, and especially I can just take that moment to like hide, because if I'm doing anything like this, and like, I don't recommend doing much of your scene with your hands over your face. We do need to see your face, but as long as I'm careful about setting it up, if I'm just like, Christina, I just, then I'm back here when she says, why are you crying? Then I can turn around and say, like, I'm not crying, which is almost always, sort of how these lines go. I'm fine, I'm fine. Right. So instead of wiping pretend tears, it's, if I set the scene up so that it makes sense that Christina thinks I might have been crying, the story is served. And so I can do that by dropping my volume. I can do that by making my body posture smaller. I can do that by dropping my eyes, and if it's necessary, I can do that by like just covering my face in some way. So all useful tools the next time you get a scene where it says like she bursts into tears. Now, if you can burst into tears on cue, oh my gosh, that's great. I think that is overweighted by actors because it just looks so impressive, right? It's a little bit like seeing somebody do a standing backflip. It's really cool. When you see somebody who's like, oh yeah, I can just do it, watch this, bloop, bloop. Like, I've only ever had one student who didn't have to be feeling anything. Like, she just seemed to have like conscious control of her tear ducts. And it was astounding. I was like, oh my God, I wish I could do that. And I can tell you, she wasn't that great an actor. She didn't stick with it. She's not acting now. And they're like, she probably still has conscious control over her tear ducts. Let's hope she doesn't abuse it in her romantic relationships. But, if you could do that, wouldn't it be a little too tempting to abuse that, with the people in your life? So the ability to cry on cue is something that I think is part of, emotional access, and that as you continue to work and grow as an actor, having access to deep sadness is important, but having access is different from being able to cry on cue, right? So can you access those feelings in yourself? Do you know where they live? Can you tell that story? I think that is, at least in terms of creating longevity for yourself, necessary. Being able to cry on cue, some people can, some people can't. If they truly need it for a shot, especially sort of at this point in your career, they will either blow menthol crystals into your eyes from just out of frame. I have one of these. I got one so I can play with my students. It's really fun. You can blow through this tear blower, and it's just like menthol crystals in a little tube, and you like right in somebody's eyes, and their eyes get all like sort of red and teary, and then you say action, and they're like bloop. Or often if you're watching a movie and you see a like perfectly formed tear roll down right from the center of somebody's eye, then very often that's because it's glycerin, and it was put in just before they started rolling. So the obviously the scenes where it's like a 4-minute continuous scene, and the actor is truly experiencing all of those feelings, I'm impressed by those too. And I'm really drawn in by them too. I'm not saying that faking one's feelings is the way that I think acting should be done. I just think that having access to the feelings is important. If there's a specific way they want that to look, there are lots of ways that they can make that happen. So, Christina, I saw you have your hand up. Do you want to ask a question there?
Yeah, I was wondering, if you want to cry, why don't you like make your eyes burn, or put an onion, or like just stare until your like eyes burn, and then you just use your emotion, and you just like, it's so sad. Does that work?
The issue with that is that it would only be appropriate if the very first line of the scene you were already crying. Does that make sense? Because typically what you'll get is a scene where like something normal is happening, and then bad news happens, and then then there's a conversation, then there's a fight that's happening, and then like the sort of emotion comes up in context in the scene. So something like that, absolutely. Like if you got a single line, where you have to be crying. Oh, okay. I haven't done this in ages, but I was showing it to a student yesterday who was doing like a comedic scene where his character was written as like bawling like a baby. And it was just like, this was just like 2 lines. It was like they set this character up as like a terrible jerk, and then oh, you know what? I'll just pull it up and I'll show it to you, because I was going to get Christina to demo it, but I'm positive that Thomas would be okay with me showing his scene. So let me pull that up for you. So the basic idea is that your diaphragm, so if I walk back to meet a close up, so your rib cage there, you find your rib cage, your diaphragm is this dome-shaped muscle just under your ribs. It's a really cool muscle. It actually bisects your entire body. So it's this dome-shaped muscle that when it contracts, it fills up the lower part of your lungs, right? Your lungs have like sort of one, sac up here and another sac down here. And up here is where we mostly breathe, is like, and then down here it's like, and your rib cage opens all the way. People talk about it as belly breathing, but your belly is not involved in breathing at all. It's just that, so I think it's more accurate to say your rib cage expands, but hey, if your belly breathing makes sense to you, then, stick with what it makes sense. But the idea is that your diaphragm contracting is involved with both laughing and crying. It's one of the reasons that both of them involve so much like good, like physical release. And so if you just start, by going ha 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 ha, give yourself that like diaphragm bounce, and then you just mush up your face into your like best ugly crying face, and then you just add that belly bounce, preferably with a little whimper first. It's weirdly convincing for comedy because it's truly all about commitment. And so here's a little clip of Thomas, from yesterday's class, doing exactly that. He was very pleased about the belly bounce. Oh, you know what? Maybe I can even show you. Maybe I can even show you the sort of what he did for his first take of the scene. So this is without the belly bounce, and then with the belly bounce.
Officer, I can't go to jail, please. I'm sorry.
Hey, what happened?
Someone complained about a dead skunk in the walls and they followed the smell.
Right, so funny, committed, like he's doing good work, but watch when we add this belly bounce. And the reason the belly bounce is useful is if you try and move your shoulders on purpose, it looks super fake. If you're like, rather than like, sometimes you'll see 4-year-olds doing that and you're like, okay, no, look, you're never going to buy that. But if you get your diaphragm going, then not only does it sort of like mimic the actual sense, but then your whole body like shakes a little bit without you having to do it on purpose. So that's when we get something like this.
Please, officer, I'm sorry. I can't go to jail. Officer, please, I'm sorry.
Hey, what happened?
Someone complained about a dead skunk in the walls and they followed the smell.
Oh my God, it's so funny. Yeah, I mean, Thomas's extreme commitment when it comes to comedy scenes is very, very pleasing to me. It's part of what's really effective for that style, I think. All right. Oof, I ran over time. Yeah, I'm glad they all were able to stick around for a couple of extra minutes. I will see you tomorrow, and I will maybe tomorrow we'll go over the branding Bonnie Gillespie stuff. And even if you can't be here for tomorrow's lesson, if you do have a photo, headshot, or sort of here's what I'm considering using as my like sort of pre-headshot to send out to agents that you are willing to share, would love to have a couple of those to look at so that I can get the folks who are in the class to say, okay, how old is this person in this photo? What kinds of characters can you see them playing on TV, and sort of get some of that to happen live, and some of that might be useful for you. And I'm going to go over Bonnie's exercise, where she recommends sort of gathering information about that. The other thing is that I have just confirmed Jennifer Copping as a guest for next week. Now she teaches at, she actually runs the film acting course, or the film acting part of the film department at Langara College, not Studio 58, but at Langara. And so, yes, please. Yeah, Flynn just asked if you should email photos. Please do. info@myfreeactingclass.com. So for anybody who's watching this video, although I'll have to post it right now if I want that. Which is probably good for me. I need to start posting them right after they're done. But Jen Copping is going to join us on Tuesday because she teaches on Wednesday. So next Tuesday, Jen Copping is going to be here, and then Wednesday we'll do the self-tape review. Jen is fantastic. I've known her for a long time. She has been an assistant director at the Arts Club. She's been lead in multiple productions, at the Arts Club. She was in a touring Broadway play for years that sort of brought her to Vancouver. She has a very extensive film and TV resume. And so we can ask her questions about that. But the thing that she is the unqualified expert, unqualified, that didn't work. I tried that creative use of language, but it makes her sound like she's not the expert. The unconditional expert. But anyway, she's the most experty expert that I know on forming and maintaining relationships in the local film and TV industry. Jen has always been that person who knows everybody somehow and knows what they're doing, and kind of at all times. That over and over again, I've been in conversations with her and other actors where she's like, oh yeah, I know that person. Oh yeah. This morning, like so-and-so told me, and I'm just like, so I'm really excited to pick her brain about building and maintaining relationships, because no matter what market you're in, that's a huge part of the sort of how actors can help their talent agent, and I think how actors can help themselves is that relationship building. Thanks, everybody. And hope to see some of you for the next one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.